Stay with us, because what you're about to hear will change how you see brilliance, how you see power, and how you see the quiet ones in the room. And if this story moves you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday morning, the kind where everything hums along like clockwork, until it doesn't. At Virion Technologies, a sleek glass and steel empire just outside Seattle, the pressure was as high as the ceilings. Investors were scheduled to arrive at noon. A live demo was queued. And CEO Marcus Vale, a man who hadn't missed a quarterly target in 10 years, paced his office like a general before battle. His shirt was crisp, his tie perfect. But his eyes, those darted from monitor to monitor, triple-checking projections and server metrics as if willing stability into existence. 30 floors below, a bus pulled up behind the building's staff entrance. Leah and her mother stepped off without a word. The girl was small, hidden under an oversized gray hoodie and gripping a faded backpack like it held treasure. Her mother worked nights as a janitor in the tech tower, and Leah often came along, too quiet and too old for her age. Nobody ever asked why. They entered through the back, no ID checks, no greetings. Security barely looked up. It was the kind of place where people in uniforms moved like ghosts. Leah liked it that way. She stayed 6 steps behind her mom, just far enough to watch how she moved through spaces that didn't belong to her. Her mother didn't fumble, didn't rush. She cleaned billion-dollar conference rooms like they were somebody else's castle, and she was just there to sweep the floors before disappearing again. Leah peeled off near the lobby, sitting at the same corner bench she always did. She pulled out her notebook, pages worn at the edges, and began sketching a circuit design she'd dreamed up the night before. Her pencil moved fast, tracing signals that spoke a language only she understood. In the background, sharp heels clicked, espresso machines hissed, and polished professionals drifted past her without ever looking down. Nobody noticed the kid with the notebook. Nobody saw her. But Leah was used to that. Being invisible had always been her superpower, until the moment it wasn't. The first sign was a flicker, just a hiccup in the overhead lights, but in a building like Virion, even the smallest anomaly was enough to tighten jaws and freeze fingers mid-keystroke. Leah paused, her pencil hovering above the half-finished sketch in her notebook. A second later, every screen in the lobby snapped to black. Phones vibrated. Tablets went dead. A strange silence followed, the kind that hums right before a storm. Then chaos. Sharp voices rose around her. "What just happened?" "We lost the grid." "Ping the core router. Now!" Across the room, a man in a pressed blazer slammed his tablet on the reception desk. "This can't be happening. Not today." He tapped his earpiece aggressively, his voice slicing through the air. "Tell me you have a backup protocol running. This is the demo day, people. Demo day." Leah sat still, wide-eyed but calm, watching like she always did. But this time, the energy felt different. Frantic, uncontrolled. A woman in heels sprinted across the floor, whispering something about a fail-safe that hadn't triggered. Someone else shouted that the local servers weren't responding. Nothing worked. Every system was locked down. One word kept circling through the rising panic. Breach. And not just a glitch in the cloud kind of breach. This was deep, intentional, paralyzing. Engineers began crowding into huddles, barking theories, kernel exploit, DNS hijack, internal override. No one knew where the failure began. No one agreed on what to do. And no one, not a single person, looked at the girl sitting quietly in the lobby, her pencil slowly tapping against the notebook she hadn't closed. Leah didn't understand everything they said, but she knew how they said it. They were spiraling, guessing, trying the usual doors and finding them all welded shut. She flipped to a clean page and started drawing again. This time, not for fun. The lines on her page weren't circuits anymore. They were questions. Was the attack external? Internal? Could it be a recursive loop locking out admin privileges from the inside? She didn't have a server. She didn't have credentials. But she had something they didn't, a pattern forming in her mind, one she recognized, one she'd seen before in simulations she was never supposed to access. The grown-ups with the suits had the badges, but Leah, she had clarity. And as alarms began to pulse softly overhead, she felt it in her gut. Something was unfolding inside that system, and she wasn't afraid of it. She was drawn to it. Have you ever seen a room full of experts freeze because a child said something they couldn't ignore? That's exactly what happened next. And if this moment grabs you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Leah didn't mean to speak. She never does. But the words slipped out before she could stop them. Soft, almost hesitant. Did anyone check the socket overflow loop? For a beat, no one moved. Then heads turned. A few snorted. One man rolled his eyes. "Who let somebody's kid in here?" he muttered, half laughing, already looking away. But not everyone laughed. Across the room, a young intern, Elias, blinked, processing the question. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He just stood still and said, "Wait, that actually makes sense." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a clear tone. A few engineers paused. The room wasn't convinced, but now they were listening. Leah felt her ears burn. She took a step back, clutching her notebook close to her chest, already preparing to vanish. But Elias didn't let the moment pass. He stepped forward and repeated her suggestion, this time louder, firmer. "It's a logical entry point," he said, "especially for a recursive lockout. She's not wrong." That changed something. Not a full turn, not yet, but a shift, the kind that makes people hold their breath and stop shouting over each other. Suddenly, she wasn't just a kid in a corner. She was a variable no one had accounted for. Leah wished she could disappear again. But it was too late. She had been seen. And whether she liked it or not, her voice, quiet as it was, had just slipped into the room like a key in a lock. What happened next wasn't planned. No one had a playbook for it. But sometimes, the moment doesn't wait for permission. And this moment had just turned. Have you ever seen a room full of experts freeze because a child said something they couldn't ignore? That's exactly what happened next. And if this moment grabs you, make sure to subscribe so you never miss stories like this one. Leah didn't mean to speak. She never does. But the words slipped out before she could stop them. Soft, almost hesitant. Did anyone check the socket overflow loop? For a beat, no one moved. Then heads turned. A few snorted. One man rolled his eyes. "Who let somebody's kid in here?" he muttered, half laughing, already looking away. But not everyone laughed. Across the room, a young intern, Elias, blinked, processing the question. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss me. He just stood still and said, "Wait, that actually makes sense." His voice wasn't loud, but it cut through the noise like a clear tone. A few engineers paused. The room wasn't convinced, but now they were listening. Leah felt her ears burn. She took a step back, clutching her notebook close to her chest, already preparing to vanish. But Elias didn't let the moment pass. He stepped forward and repeated her suggestion, this time louder, firmer. "It's a logical entry point," he said, "especially for a recursive lockout. She's not wrong." That changed something. Not a full turn, not yet, but a shift. The kind that makes people hold their breath and stop shouting over each other. Suddenly, she wasn't just a kid in a corner. She was a variable no one had accounted for. Leah wished she could disappear again, but it was too late. She had been seen, and whether she liked it or not, her voice, quiet as it was, had just slipped into the room like a key in a lock. What happened next wasn't planned. No one had a playbook for it. But sometimes the moment doesn't wait for permission. And this moment had just turned. No one said, "Let her try." No one needed to. The silence was its own decision, stretched tight across the glass-walled room like a wire. Leah stood just outside the chaos, clutching her notebook like a shield until Elias stepped aside and motioned to a vacant terminal. "Here," he said gently, pulling out a chair that was clearly too tall for her. "You'll need to stand on it." The room didn't erupt. There was no dramatic music, just a dozen skeptical eyes watching a little girl climb onto a chair and face down a system their entire infrastructure team had failed to fix. The keyboard was adult-sized, the interface complex, the screen littered with half-finished diagnostics and locked commands. She didn't ask questions, didn't need a tour. She stood still for exactly 10 seconds, lining up the layout in her mind, breathing slow like she did when piecing together broken circuits on her bedroom floor. Her fingers hovered, then moved. Not fast, but precise. Commands appeared, lines of code unspooled. No one had briefed her. No one had shown her the problem. And yet, she moved like someone who had already seen the terrain, like she was retracing steps in a place no one else could even enter. Across the room, the IT lead frowned. One of the executives mumbled, "This is insane." But no one stepped in to stop her. Not now. Not with the system still dead and every expert still guessing. Leah typed without looking up. Her notebook sat unopened beside her, untouched. She didn't need it anymore. Every command came from memory. Every choice came from logic only she understood. And as the screen blinked, just once, revealing a buried prompt that none of their protocols had triggered, a few jaws dropped. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. But it was real. She was inside. No one else had made it this far. And for the first time, the people in the room realized the unthinkable. The janitor's kid wasn't here by accident. She might be the only one who actually knew what she was doing. Leah moved like someone who wasn't just typing commands, but speaking a language the rest of the room didn't know existed. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, deliberate and unshaking, while the screen responded with prompts and backdoors no one else had managed to find. No guesses, not trial and error. She was navigating with something deeper. Recognition. The shell interface blinked. Internal firewalls, false diagnostics, encryption layers meant to mislead even top-level engineers. She moved through them with quiet precision. One man leaned forward. "That command, we didn't teach that. We don't even use that protocol anymore." Another whispered, "She's deeper in the system than anyone's gotten since the breach." Leah wasn't listening. She was following something. Not just code, but intent. The further she went, the more the attack's structure unfolded like a message left behind by a stranger who didn't want to be found, except by someone who could understand. She slowed, squinting at a recursive loop nested inside a block of disguised traffic commands. A flicker of memory returned. That line, that loop structure. She'd seen it before, years ago. A bootleg script from a forgotten thread on an abandoned forum. Digital phantoms. It wasn't just an exploit. It was a blueprint, a style, a fingerprint. The realization chilled her. This wasn't random. It was personal. Whoever built this wasn't just good. They were like her. Someone who taught themselves in the dark. Someone who saw code as a living thing. The breach wasn't designed to destroy. It was designed to test, to challenge. It was a conversation waiting for an answer. Her stomach twisted. The attacker had buried their voice deep inside the architecture, trusting that no one would reach it, unless they thought like them, unless they were one of them. Leah stepped back from the terminal, just for a breath, her hands trembling now. Not from fear, but from knowing what it meant. She wasn't just inside a machine. She was staring into a reflection. A mind just like hers had done this. And the most terrifying part wasn't that she understood it. It was that she understood it too well. Behind the glass wall, CEO Marcus Vale stood still, arms folded, eyes locked on the girl at the terminal. His expression wasn't angry. It was calculating. He didn't like loose ends. And this situation felt dangerously unpredictable. A child, unverified, untrained, was inside their deepest systems, bypassing protections that took years to build. It didn't matter that the room had gone quiet or that the red error screens were slowly giving way to green. He saw liability. He saw risk. Without looking away, he turned to the engineer nearest him. "Get security," he said quietly. "Now." Down the hall, two guards were already en route, one speaking quickly into his shoulder mic. Inside the room, the IT lead spotted them first. His posture stiffened. Then Elias saw them and moved. Without thinking, he stepped in front of Leah, planting himself like a firewall, shaky but solid. "She's the only one making progress," he said, louder than he intended. The guards hesitated, just for a second, surprised by his conviction. One glanced back toward Marcus, waiting for a confirmation. But the CEO said nothing. He was watching Elias now, watching how his shoulders were squared, how his voice didn't tremble even though his legs did. The kid was scared, but he wasn't backing down. "You're telling me," Marcus said slowly, "that you've turned over critical infrastructure recovery to a child with no clearance, no credentials, and no oversight." Elias didn't flinch. "I'm telling you, she's already 3 layers in and hasn't tripped a single failsafe." Around them, murmurs swelled. "She found something in the logs. She opened paths we couldn't touch. She might actually be doing it." But Leah didn't hear any of it. Her focus stayed locked on the code, hands moving again, eyes scanning through anomalies that would have fooled even seasoned engineers. She wasn't breaking in. She was listening, interpreting, solving. And just outside her awareness, the room was shifting again, not from panic, but from disbelief. For the first time, no one in that glass tower was waiting for a report. They were watching the janitor's daughter dismantle a disaster they couldn't even define. The deeper Leah went, the quieter the room became. No one dared speak. It was as if even the blinking screens were holding their breath. Leah's eyes narrowed, her hands slowed, not because she was lost, but because the patterns were starting to feel familiar in a way that shook her. A nested command, disguised as a corrupted log entry, sat buried in the system's root layer. It wasn't just clever, it was beautiful, elegant, written with restraint and intention, like the hand of someone who didn't just know code, but loved it. She traced the recursive logic, step by step, until she stopped cold. One line, obscure, buried, out of place, matched something she had copied into her notebook 3 years ago from a shadowy old forum. Her breath caught. This wasn't coincidence. It was signature work. The variable names, the looping structure, the fail-safe layering. It mirrored the same techniques she'd studied late at night under dim light on a hand-me-down laptop with half its keys missing. Whoever wrote this had walked the same crooked path she had, alone, hungry, unseen. And now they were speaking to her across the network, not with words, but with logic. She sat back slightly, heart pounding. This wasn't a virus, it was a message, a challenge, written for someone like her, someone who could read it. And suddenly, the fear hit her, because if someone with her skill had chosen to build this, what did that mean about the road she was on? Had they tried to be heard and failed? Had the silence broken them? Leah felt her throat tighten. The attacker wasn't shouting. They weren't angry. They were precise, controlled, cold. That was the part that frightened her the most, because she could understand it too well. She looked down at the terminal, the lines of code blurring for a second. This wasn't just a test of skill anymore. It was a question of identity. The person behind this attack had chosen destruction. But she, right now, had a choice, too. Behind her, Elias leaned in. "What is it?" he asked. Her voice came out low, almost a whisper. "I think I know who built this." "A group?" "No," she said. "Someone like me." Leah didn't answer any more questions. She didn't need to. Her fingers were moving again, steady now, tracing the intruder's logic backward, decoding it layer by layer, like pulling thread from a tightly woven net. Around her, grown men stood frozen, watching a child dive into a system they had built and failed to defend. She bypassed one block, then another, her hands never pausing, her eyes locked to the terminal. One false step could trigger a full lockdown, but she didn't flinch. She found the loop, the first one, the root from which the rest had grown. She entered a single line of counter code, clean, quiet, surgical. The room held still. Then it happened. One screen blinked, then another. Red overlays vanished. A small green indicator flashed to life in the corner of the central terminal. No one breathed. Then someone whispered, "She found the shell." Another replied, "That shouldn't even be visible." Elias nodded slowly, because she authenticated manually. No one cheered. No one clapped. They couldn't. It didn't feel like a win. It felt like a revelation. They hadn't watched someone solve a problem. They had watched someone understand it, speak to it in its own language, and walk it back from the edge. Leah stepped back slowly from the terminal, her notebook still pressed to her chest like armor. She didn't look up, didn't ask for credit. She had done what she came to do. She had answered the question hidden in the breach. And now, the room that once couldn't see her couldn't look away. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how brilliance can live in silence, unnoticed, don't forget to subscribe, because there are more stories like Leah's, stories that remind us of the people we overlook, and the power they hold when someone finally pays attention. Marcus Vale didn't go home that night. He sat alone in his office long after the building emptied, the city lights casting long reflections on the glass. The system was back online. Reports were flowing. Stakeholders were calming. But none of it felt like a win. He opened the security footage again, watched the frame-by-frame of Leah at the terminal. Her stillness, her focus, the way her hands never hesitated. She didn't perform. She didn't posture. She simply solved what no one else could. That's when he saw it, a scrap of lined paper resting near his keyboard, folded twice. Not official, not labeled, just quiet. He opened it carefully. 7 words, written in small, careful print. "Thank you for seeing me." Really seeing me. He stared at it for a long time, the office silent except for the hum of the building. It wasn't about the system anymore. It never had been. It was about the girl with oil-stained fingers who cracked open more than just firewalls. She cracked him. The man who thought everything important wore a badge or carried a title. The man who almost called security on the only person who still believed that broken things could be fixed. He placed the note beside her sketch, the one he'd framed without telling anyone, and leaned back, eyes wet, chest tight. That night, he rewrote more than just the company's policy. He rewrote his own. If you believe stories like this deserve to be heard, stories of the unseen, the unspoken, and the unexpected, don't forget to subscribe, because sometimes it only takes one voice, one note, one girl, to remind us that real brilliance doesn't shout. It waits until someone listens.